Check, check. Yeah. behind the judges. Which one?
Yeah, thank you. Because I don't want to keep it on me.
Stranger.
Last year.
They'll all come in at 1:30. The club.
God, I love perfection. It's great. It's close.
Small, all dressed pizza.
Good girl.
And whatever lead judge asks for, it has to happen. That's why he's the chosen one. So how do you like your pizza?
You ever read anything about
It was last year or the year before. Somebody invited me.
not a next round?
No. Well, that was burnt down actually. It's just rebuilding it.
Is that right?
Yeah. I don't know if maybe he's finished. But yeah, the whole thing burnt.
Oh, they have water here.
Looks fine. Maybe turn it a little bit.
This is good.
It's good.
Just stand where you're sitting right now.
Jeff, there's bottles here. There's bottles. We're gonna.
Oh, it's full.
Good luck. Good luck. Thank you. Good luck. Great. Is everyone ready? Welcome to the finals of the 2017 John Molson MBA International Case Competition. My name is Connie Cusano, and I will be the judge coordinator for today's presentation. The first school that will be presenting is University of Calgary, Haskayne School of Business. First, I would like to ask that everyone please turn off any electronic device or cell phones. I will now kindly ask our distinguished judges to please present themselves.
My name is Nabil Beitinjani. I work for CGI in business intelligence.
Maryse Benhoff, President, BG Communications.
Michael Berg, Managing Partner at the Luger Group. We're a real estate development company.
Hi, my name is Mark Dover. I'm the CEO of a group of entrepreneurial businesses based here and in Toronto.
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Béliveau. I'm the District Manager for Export Development Canada for the Quebec City office.
I would like to remind University of Calgary, Haskayne School of Business, that they will have a maximum of 25 minutes to present the case. I will indicate to the team when 5 minutes and when 1 minute are remaining. I would ask the team to please acknowledge that you have seen the sign. After the presentation, the judges will have a maximum of 15 minutes for questions. I will indicate to the judges when 1 minute is remaining. I would like to wish the presenting team good luck. Bienvenue au final du concours international d'études de cas MBA de John Molson 2017. Mon nom est Connie Cusano et je suis votre coordonnatrice pour la présentation de l'Université of Calgary, Haskayne School of Business. S'il vous plaît, éteignez tout appareil électronique ou téléphone cellulaire. Merci et bienvenue à nos juges qui se sont déjà présentés. Je veux souligner à l'Université of Calgary, Haskayne School of Business, que l'équipe a un maximum de 25 minutes pour présenter son analyse. Je vais signaler à l'équipe lorsqu'il restera 5 minutes et puis encore 1 minute. J'aimerais demander à l'équipe de m'indiquer qu'ils ont bien vu le signal. Après la présentation, le panneau de juges a un maximum de 15 minutes pour les questions. Je vais signaler au juge lorsqu'il restera 1 minute. J'aimerais souhaiter bonne chance à l'équipe. Vous pouvez maintenant commencer votre présentation. You may now begin your presentation.
Hello, bonjour. Nous voulions tout d'abord vous remercier de nous offrir l'opportunité de présenter devant vous aujourd'hui. Believe it or not, I've actually been practicing that all week, but I think it still probably bears clarification. So first of all, before we start, I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is Allison Lennox. With me, I have my colleagues Kenny Lauren, Abir Habibullah, and Jeffrey Hall, and together we are Haskayne Consulting. We're so excited to be here today in Seattle presenting to you, Mr. Tilden, about Alaska Airlines and how you can take flight. Now, before I start, I'd like to tell a little story about how when I was growing up, my dad was actually a lawyer and primarily worked in the airline industry. So my first memory of his career was him working on a huge merger in Calgary, creating the biggest airline in Canada now, Air Canada. Whenever I take a flight, he asks me, what type of airplane were you flying on? And when I go home now to visit, he's actually turned my bedroom into an airplane hangar for miniature airplanes. So my life has been touched by the airline industry for a long time, and for that reason, I'm very excited to be here today. So why are we here today? What is the problem you're facing? We know that Alaska Airlines needs to decide whether to keep the Virgin Atlantic brand or whether it could keep it as separate brands. You said the thing that you lose sleep over most is what to do about this in the merger. We don't want you to lose sleep. So quickly, before we get into things too much, a brief overview of our executive summary today. Have to bear with us, some technical difficulties.
Yeah, sorry, the slides are changing here, but they're not changing there. I'm not sure if someone can help us.
Where's the clicker?
This one, is it on maybe?
Yeah.
Fortunately, we're here to consult on the airline industry, not the IT industry.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
We stop the time, and your time is still full.
We have the full 25? Okay, thank you.
As I was saying, before we get going, I want to run through a quick executive summary, what we're going to talk about today. It's a lot of information up there, so don't worry about writing it all down. It will go back up at the end. So first of all, as I said, you need to decide whether to operate under one brand or two. So we do want you to absorb Virgin Atlantic into the Alaska Airlines brand, but we want you to take a phased approach to this, a careful approach. We know there's a risk with that of alienating Virgin companies, so we want you to identify the common values to both customer segments and find ways to adopt the core competencies from Virgin Airlines into the Alaskan airline experience. We know you need to manage fleet integration, so we want a gradual phase out of the Virgin fleet. You need to address cultural differences internally with the two companies, so we want you to do a careful change management plan and implement an Alaska Airlines Academy for training. There's different in-flight entertainment systems, so we want you to move Virgin over to Alaska over to Vird's Red entertainment system. We know you need to address the two different loyalty programs, so we want you to implement a common but program that has two options. So to choose whether to get points based on miles flown or based on cost of flight. And finally, there's high competition, but we believe that by adopting this approach, you'll be able to best obtain synergies and compete with the Big Four and other low-cost airlines. This will yield $1.7 billion in profit by the year 2020. So that was a whole lot of information. What does that really mean? Well, Alaska Airlines should gradually absorb the Virgin Airlines brand, taking the best of each brand to create an experience that will serve both of the company's customers. So we believe there are common values such as that for low fares, customer service, and innovation. So before we talk about what you really need to do, why did you buy? Well, the main reasons were to gain key destinations and slots at airports such as San Francisco and LAX. You said that it's high time that the airline strengthened its network beyond its core routes. And we know that both airlines are known for strong growth, distinct styles, and outstanding customer service. So expanding route network and access to the West Coast was a key reason for the acquisition, so you need to keep that in mind. But there are crowded skies. There are other competitors that you have to think about. So it's a very competitive space. You've got the big four. You have other low-cost carriers such as Delta and JetBlue. We believe that the merger will bring together two profitable airlines to create strong competition for the big four. But the only way to gain this advantage is the economies of scale. So you need to address the cost by being able to bring the best of both airlines and get efficiencies and things like marketing and other SG&A expenses. You're not going to be able to get that competitive advantage if you keep the two airlines operating separately. So the best way to realize advantage is to merge and gain those economies of scale. So you have acknowledged there are seemingly disparate brands. You have Virgin with the cool, hip, bi-coastal urban traveler. And then you have Alaska, which is a tech-savvy West Coast leisure travel. And when you identify those markets in those ways, they seem very different. But what you need to recognize is what they value in an airline is very similar. They want innovation, they want affordable prices, and they want customer service. And what we say at the bottom here is you can make a long flight feel short with the right customer experience, and ultimately we believe these customers are looking for the same experience. So what we're trying to give you today is a practical, real-world, implementable solution. You said it yourself. You're not going to rip the Band-Aid off and you're going to take a good look at what Virgin does and try to adopt what's best. So my colleagues are going to come in and tell you exactly how we're going to do that. So we want you to fasten your seatbelts, and Kenny is going to provide more detail on our recommendation.
Thank you very much, Allison. So as Allison mentioned, these two brands, while they were distinct and they are do have a different feel to them, there are very many similar customer traits that we're looking at. So taking a look a bit more in depth at Alaskan Airlines, for the same price you get more. With Virgin America, it's a bit more hip, chic service, and again, innovative. But what you're going to see with all these lists of how these brands are characterized is that there are a lot of similarities. So with the bolded items there, customer, efficient operations, and innovation. So while these brands may have a bit of a different feel to them, at the core of the value proposition that you're driving and the operations, there are very many similarities. So that's why there's a very good fit, and we see a lot of synergies from merging these two brands together. So overall, when you bring these two together, you get a better value proposition, which is focused on high customer service and lower prices than other legacy carriers. You have improved performance metrics. We know that both companies do very well in their metrics that are measured in the airlines, such as on-time performance, bags lost, and complaints from customers. So we really want to leverage the Alaska Airlines in their competency in being on time, and really focus on Virgin's competency in baggage handling. And finally, innovation. We know that Alaskan Airlines has a capability of introducing and adopting new technologies within their aircraft, and also Virgin Airlines has their Red in-flight system, which is very innovative, very user-friendly. So merging those together will really bring a better customer service by combining these customers to serve your customers. So overall, how do we merge these two brands? Well, a fleet is obviously the big part of any airline. So we want you to standardize your fleet. We want you to move away from the Airbus that Virgin's use and move to an all-Boeing aircraft. Why does it help to have all one type of aircraft? Well, it removes the need to cross-train your crews. It eliminates the need for the high amount of parts inventory. It also lowers your overall maintenance cost because operations can be more streamlined. So overall, I want you to sell the 35 owned. And in addition to that, we know you do have some high debt obligations from the acquisition, so we want you to sell 35 of your Boeing-owned planes and lease them back from a financing firm. So this plane transition will have to happen over time. As Allison mentioned, we don't want to rip off this Band-Aid. So we do not want you to renew the aircraft leases for the Airbus. So with Airbus, we know that over time we can slowly get rid of these aircraft without too much cost and penalty. And we want you to lease new Boeing aircraft in order to replace those on the existing Virgin routes. We see a good transition of perhaps 6 per year for the next 7 years until we can fully have all Boeing aircraft. And we want you to retrofit existing Boeing aircraft in order to be able to accommodate the in-flight entertainment system that Virgin has. We really see a value in this for your customers that will differentiate you. And we really want you to do this on your younger planes. So as it's a transition over time, the older planes, we're not going to retrofit them and as they get phased out over time. But any new aircraft and the younger aircraft, we do see retrofitting being a key element here. So standardizing the fleet over time will position Alaskan Airlines best for the future. So taking a look at different routes, we want Alaskan Airlines to transition and take over these routes as we shift out the fleet of planes. So aligned with the fleet transition and the crew training, and doing this to steal market share from the Big Four with your better value proposition. A couple subsidiary considerations through this transition. We know you have your loyalty plan, so we want you to merge both loyalty plans and give customers the option to either take cash rewards or mile rewards. With pricing, we see Alaskan Airlines maintaining their dynamic pricing model, which is priced below the legacy carriers, the big players, while creating a better customer experience. With information technology, we want you to merge to Virgin's IT system. We know they have a enhanced system with the Sabre, and we really see an opportunity there. And finally, non-ticket revenue. We know this is very important in the airline industry, so we do want you to charge extra for meals, seat selection, baggage, and a fuel surcharge. So creating the optimal experience for the customer will really realize the value of this acquisition. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how this recommendation will affect your financial projections and some other alternatives we considered, and my colleague Abir is very excited to explain that to you.
Thank you very much, Kenny. So we start off by looking at the Alaskan Airlines business model. What really stands out is the operational efficiency that your company has been able to achieve, and that's the core strength that we want you to capitalize on. So as you can see on this graph, comparing the top 10 airlines in the US, Alaska Airlines is number 2 in the operating margins that you are able to achieve. We want you to replicate this same model to the Virgin Airlines business and increase profitability. Another aspect that to put in context of what this recommendation can do for you is we're looking outwards. While it is important to integrate the Virgin Airlines customers into your customer base, we're also looking at the other 93%, which is the Big Four and other airlines, and we want to capture market share that they have. As of right now, you have 5% market share. We're looking at the other 95 that you can also grab. Another key concern that Kenny briefly mentioned was your debt-to-equity ratio. With your acquisition recently, you put on $2 billion in debt, and your debt-to-equity ratio has increased quite a bit. So we have a strategy for you to lower this by a sell and lease back strategy for your aircraft. So this is basically, we're selling 35 aircrafts at the average rate of $30 million. This is based on all of your aircrafts and the total asset value of $5 billion of the total aircrafts out there right now. And that gives us an estimated $1 billion in additional cash that we can use to pay down this debt. We also looked at some assumptions to project your financials into the future. What this recommendation would do for you in terms of revenue and profitability. So those assumptions are first, we're looking at 2016 financial statement onwards as a consolidated statement of the two companies. The available seat miles increase at the compounded annual growth rate 5-year historicals, and the load factor stays at 85%, which has been your average for the 5 years. And the most important one here is the net income. So your net income margin is above 16% for Alaska, but it's close to about 10% for Virgin. So once we consolidate those two, we're looking at about 12% to begin with in year 1. But we think that using your strategies and efficiencies that Alaska has in-house, you can increase the combined income margin to 15% by 2020. So looking at what these numbers do for you here, in terms of revenue is increasing to about 11.3 billion by 2020, and then we can go over more information in the question period if you have any questions about how these numbers work. Looking at profitability, as I mentioned, this is the most important factor that we're looking at here. The 85% of the US market, the passengers are price sensitive, they're efficiency sensitive, and that's what we're targeting with our Alaska and Virgin combination. As I mentioned, this was our sell and lease back strategy. So you can see the numbers that had already gone over before in more detail. There's also costs that were associated with our implementation strategy. Looking at here first is the creation of the AA Academy program. So that's a one-time cost of about $1 million to develop the new training modules. Then we're looking at retrofitting the facilities for all of these different training centers, having a marketing budget for the loyalty program, both internal, so these are customers we already have, and external towards the new customers that we're looking to acquire and enroll into these programs. Those are one-time fees, and then hiring additional staff to run these new training and development programs, so 1 manager and 2 senior managers. We're also looking to outfit your new planes with the specifications that Kenny went over, so that's about $1 to $1.5 million per plane. And then installing the RED in the existing AA planes, so that's about $250,000 per plane. We also looked at other alternatives that your company could have taken instead, but we don't think any of these are an optimal strategy for you right now. So the most closely one we looked at was to not merge Virgin Airlines, but to operate as a separate entity and just code share. We don't think that's a good idea at all, and the reason is if you are only looking at the people that want to travel Virgin Airlines, it's a small market. We want you to think bigger and look at the larger strategy of the 85% other customers out there. You will forego the cost efficiencies that Alaska can transfer over to Virgins, which will result in more profitability. And then if you keep the Virgin brand name, you'll have to pay a 0.7% revenue to the loyalty program, which will obviously cut into your profitability. And as we see, the airline industry is consolidating. That is what the business model is lending itself to, and we think you should also utilize these benefits. Second, we looked at expanding internationally, going to more different countries. We don't think that's a good idea for you right now, is because it's different from how you operate your business right now. If you have international travel, there's cabotage, there's complexities with the turnaround time, the flight duration is different, so your fleet is not optimal for long-haul international flights, and the acquiring gate space in all these different airports internationally is also a tricky challenge, so we don't want you to expand internationally. And finally, we looked at merging the two companies immediately, rushing the merger. We don't think that's a good idea because it's going to be capital intensive, retrofitting all these planes at once. There's the risk of alienating your customer base if you do not do it in a smooth transition phase where you understand your customer and adopt accordingly. And then there's also cultural impact on your employees. The Virgin employee base is used to working in a different environment than the Alaskan employee base. So we want you to integrate those two. So coming back to our recommendation, we want Alaska Airlines should absorb Virgin Airlines by taking the best of each brand and combining those two to create greater shared value. So by now you're probably wondering what the implementation on all this looks like, so I'm going to invite my colleague Jeff to go over that.
Thank you very much, Abir. So while operational efficiencies and financials are very exciting, bearing in mind that I have a flight to catch tomorrow, I'm really interested in the customer journey of a Virgin Atlantic or Alaska Airlines customer. So with our recommendation, I'd like to walk you through the stages of taking one of our flights, from booking and collecting points, boarding and flying, to landing and unloading. First off, booking and collecting. So through the booking software, we'd like to merge that software immediately. So whether you're signing in through Alaska Airlines or you're signing in through Virgin America, you're using the same software. Again, this will identify redundancies and start to cut down on the operational expenses. Update to meet the most recent version of Sabre, as my colleagues mentioned, and then make code sharing agreements immediately. So really start to capitalize on those new gates that you have thanks to the Virgin America acquisition. Now, for collecting, we've talked about the multi-tier rewards model. There's concerns about customers losing the ability to earn on miles or losing the ability to earn on price. We think by merging them and offering the choice, you can offer the strongest loyalty rewards program in the entire industry. So once you're there and you're boarding and flying, how does that feel to a customer? So both the employee groups are happy and productive, both Virgin Atlantic and Alaska Air. So we'd like you to maintain those groups separate in the short term. And we want to look for quick wins in operational efficiency. So we know, for example, that Alaska is struggling with lost baggage right now. Fortunately, Virgin America, is very strong in that. So look for what are the things that Virgin America does to really control that baggage claim system and ensure that we can move Alaska Airlines up in that ranking. In terms of flying and what it feels like once you get on the plane, we'd like you to gradually turn over the fleet. We know that it's very expensive to retrofit these planes, so it does have to be a staged approach. But the first thing we'd like you to introduce is the red infotainment system in your Alaska Airlines planes. We believe we can retrofit about one a month for a cost of $250,000, which would get your entire fleet retrofitted in about 7.5 years. Now, once you've landed and you're on to unloading, we want you to adopt the best practices from flight and ground crews in both cultures. So again, we must improve the baggage consistency. Alaska is currently the worst in the US. However, we'd also really like to maintain fewest complaints. That's how customers make their decisions on which carrier to fly, and Alaska is the strongest in the country right now. And we'd also really like to reduce these Virgin Atlantic delays. That's an absolute deal breaker for a customer, and you want to be #1 across all markets in your new company. So how do we get the word out? Well, there needs to be a marketing plan. There's some very clear messages we'd like you to hit here. So for the same price, you just get more. That's been the Alaska tagline, and it's even more applicable now. You'll have to highlight the advantages of the combined loyalty program, and you can demonstrate your world-class in-flight experience. This will really help to assuage the concerns about pricing changes that were identified in your material. Now, the itinerary for rolling this out internally is in 3 phases. So the first 18 months, changing the culture and looking for quick wins. Then moving to a transition phase, and finally to an integration phase. The most important of these is phase 1. So that's precisely what we're looking at here, and I know this is very detailed, but bear with me. So first of all, looking to get those code sharing efficiencies. This falls into the quick win category. You can see in the second column the departments responsible and the criteria. So looking to maintain that high load factor. In a low margin industry such as the airline industry, this is absolutely critical. And then we'd like to grow your revenue seat miles faster than the industry average. This will take place over the first 3 months. Developing the culture program is going to take small cross-functional teams. So people from all aspects of each organization to understand what are the strong points of each culture and how do we merge them. There needs to be consistent feedback, and there needs to be buy-in at the top of all departments and within key players of each department. So merging and launching the rewards program, that's a separate entity to that. So the marketing teams from both Alaska and Virgin will be responsible for that over the next 12 months. And then beginning to hire employees to work at the Alaska Airlines Academy. We look for people with experience in change management and people who have a close understanding of the industry. We think we can get those hires. There will be 4 of them, a senior manager and 3 managers done in about 6 months. Then you can begin to retrofit your existing training facilities. Training is a huge cost of operations for an airline. There are training facilities all across the country. Within 6 to 12 months, we think we can start to retrofit some of the the busier ones, the bigger ones with consistent branding, so develop a strong new feel for this new company. And then you can begin training key staff. So this starts, again, at the top. You have to get buy-in at the top. And then crew leads, senior pilots, things like that to ensure that they feel like they own the culture from the very start. And this really comes down to the fact that culture is critical. So identify the champions and the resistors, give them input from the start so they feel like they really own that process. Now, this Alaska Air Academy, you may be wondering what that looks like. So it starts with a new training program. So again, jointly developed. Understand what the differences in the culture are. How do they help each other? How do they hurt each other? And get input from all levels of the organization. We want your employees to believe they own this new culture right from the start. Now, with any flight, there's a risk for turbulence, so we've looked at some of the biggest risks and how to mitigate them. We know that your competitors will respond, but you have a better value proposition and more cost-efficient operations. Your shareholders may be unhappy with this merger, so we think we can reach those synergies carefully and quickly, so to demonstrate to them that you are achieving value, but you're not having to be too capital intensive. There's a risk of losing and alienating the Virgin Atlantic customers, which is why we'd like you to integrate the best parts of both brands. There's always a risk in the airline industry that your flight crews and your ground crews may unionize. So we'd like you to explore an employee ownership model similar to Southwest or WestJet, because unionized employees drive your costs way, way up. and there's always a risk of fuel price fluctuation. So in the event that fuel prices do go up, you can pass that on to the consumer with small fuel surcharges. In the event that prices are low, it helps you keep your prices low. So flying into the future, we evaluated some options that we're not recommending right now, but may be complementary to your business in the future. And we really see an opportunity here for Alaska Airline Vacations. So you've got a strong brand, you've got customer acceptance, so we think through partnerships with hotels, taxi companies, rental car companies, you can provide comprehensive packages so that they get that Alaska Airlines experience from the second they get to the airport to the second they get back home. We think that's a strong possibility for you in the future, but not right now. So now I'd like to ask you to prepare for landing, and I'd like to invite Allison back to the stage to wrap up.
Thank you, Jeff. So to reiterate what we've talked about today, we believe that Alaska Airlines needs to adopt a phased approach to absorbing the Virgin Airline brands, taking the best of each brand to create an experience that will serve both companies' customers. This recommendation, we believe, addresses a multitude of issues and gives the possibility that someday down the line, my kids will be talking about how their mother helped Alaska Airlines create a successful merger with Virgin Airlines. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to understand a little bit better, Javier, if you can go back over the financials and explain to us the synergies per year we're getting going forward.
If you can move the slides back to the financial assumptions, please. Or one more, yes. Right, so how we were looking at this is the synergies really, the value we see is the competencies of Alaska Airlines to run a lean operational model. So as of right now, Alaska has one of the highest operational margins in the industry. We're thinking of transferring these competencies over to the Virgin operation. So as of right now, Virgin Airlines net margin is about 10%, and Alaska is about 16%. So if you combine those two numbers, if you consolidate their income statement and ours for the base year, which is 2015, the net margin is about 12%. So we're thinking with the new competencies, you're able to get a leaner operation and trend towards the same margins that Alaska has in-house to the whole organization. That's Alaska and Virgin combined.
So I'd like to understand where you got the idea that the aircraft nautical mile ability was limited for international flights. Because at present, there are flights that go from San Francisco to Buenos Aires, which is approximately 14 hours, which is the generally accepted long range for flights. So where did you get the idea that the aircrafts were not capable of such distance flights?
It's a great point, and the Boeing fleet certainly is capable of covering a lot of distances. However, that was only one of the factors that we considered when we looked at going internationally. So while that may not be the only limiting factor, it certainly changes your model to have to operate a lot of long-haul flights. Moreover, we really considered the change from operating trans-border, so up to Canada, down to Mexico and the Caribbean, to really working transatlantic. To get into the key hubs in Europe and in Asia is extremely expensive, extremely complicated, and it doesn't fit with your mission. We saw a much bigger opportunity to capture a lot of the US market. So while your aircraft may have the capability to fly transatlantic, we simply believe that's not a strong option right now.
I'm really worried about the fact that we're merging two very different customer groups, the Virgin group and the Alaskan group. And it seems to me that we have a huge branding question right out of the gate. I mean, right now, today, when we have two very, very different customer groups, do you have a plan on branding today?
Absolutely, great question. So when we looked at the two airlines and the groups of customers they served, we saw what we think is more of a superficial difference between them. So the way they were described, whether they were hip or business or leisure, but what they were actually looking for and the reason they were choosing their airlines were things like affordability, having innovative service offerings, and incredible customer service. So that's why we believe that you can absorb the Virgin brand into the Alaska Airline brands and just take some of the best customer service practices from the Virgin Airline brand and deliver what both customer segments will want. In addition to that, we know that Alaska Airlines customer base is significantly larger than Virgin's base. So we believe we can keep Virgin customers, but at the end of the day, serving Alaska Airlines customers better is the priority.
Just as a follow-up, do you see an opportunity to create some excitement through some sort of massive ad campaign, TV, radio, internet? I mean, do you have any plans in that regard?
Yes, absolutely. You'll notice that in our cost of implementation, we've allocated an additional $4 million for an outward-facing marketing campaign. The place that we see that focusing initially, to answer your question, is that the new loyalty program applies in the short term to both Alaska and Virgin, who for now will still continue to operate their own branded planes, but the loyalty programs will merge immediately. So we'd really like to highlight to customers the ability to choose based on, if I'm someone who flies trans from east to west quite a bit, I can collect on miles. If I fly from Seattle to Portland all the time, I can collect on price. So building that really strong loyalty program and advertising that in the short term is going to start to draw people towards the new valuable acquisition that you've made.
We still are relatively a blip on the map with a 6.1% market share. What do you see as a long-term plan?
Thank you for that question. Overall, we do see opportunity in focusing on the U.S. market specifically. So we obviously know you have a very good stronghold on the western side of West Coast, and we do see you trying to expand into those eastern hubs in the long-term future. But more imminently is to learn how to manage these two brands and focus on the integration of these two companies.
You haven't addressed the licensing fee that Virgin Airlines is currently paying to Virgin America is paying to Virgin Airline as you progress through this slow phase or phased approach. How do you suggest dealing with this licensing fee, please?
It's a great question, and it's something that's certainly unique to the Virgin America brand, and it cuts directly out of your profits at the end of the year. So we want to eventually do away with that, as we mentioned in our program, but we understand that the cost of doing away with it immediately and retrofitting and repainting and getting new uniforms and new training to switch all of Virgin America over to Alaska immediately is just absolutely prohibitive. So it is a concern, but the cost of doing it immediately is much, much greater, which is why we're recommending a very phased, careful, step-by-step approach to doing that.
You talked about returning or selling some of our assets to raise funds. Where do you use those funds? The $1 billion.
Can you go forward a couple of slides? Right, so this is our sell and leaseback strategy, and this originates from our industry knowledge of what JetBlue is doing right now. The aircrafts we have right now are 80% owned in Alaska Airlines. So by selling some of these aircrafts to a private equity company and leasing them back from them, we change it from a capital asset to an operational asset. So it'll be an operational expenditure. The $1 billion that we will generate through this strategy will be used to pay down our debt level. So this will reduce first our interest, but at the same time also increase our profitability, because as it becomes an operational expense, our net income, our taxes will be lower, increasing the dollar amount of our net income.
So you suggested only retrofitting some of the aircrafts with the red experience and not the others. How can we offer a red experience to only some of the clientele and not to all the clientele?
Absolutely. So the idea is, again, in line with our recommendation to take a phased approach. We understand that this is important to do, but we want to present a plan that's realistic for you. So we want to, in the short term, do a limited number of aircrafts, but in the long term, absolutely have available to everyone. I know from my experience flying that sometimes I get on a plane with an airline and it has an entertainment system, and other times it doesn't. And that's just part of the reality of moving towards a new system. So ultimately, in the long term, we would like to have it all on aircrafts, but we're going to take a phased approach to doing so.
To go back to the previous question as a follow-up, I'm not all that excited about selling 35 aircraft. I like owning my aircraft. I'm wondering how you feel about, given the debt levels that we're taking on, if we'd be viable without the sale of the 35 aircraft.
We think that the core strength of Alaska Airlines is its high margin. So you are competing in a space that can take on all these new, all these bigger, larger airlines as you get gate access from East to West Coast through Virgin Airlines. And if you were to ignore this strategy and keep your debt levels high, that's going to increase your interest expense. That's all the operational cost of as the interest expense is more, the amount of price reduction you can offer to your customers or be competitive on pricing with other airlines is the propensity is going to be limited. And we don't want you to limit yourself and utilize this strategy instead to have more room for that.
One of the things that keeps me up at night is that the name Alaska screams regional, and Virgin America is a global brand. For that 0.7%, don't I want to think about attracting all the people who'd like to experience or have the Virgin experience getting on my airplanes?
It's a wonderful question. We identified through your materials that the word Alaska screams quality. So while it may feel like a regional airline to some, those who have been through the Alaska Air experience understand that it is absolutely the finest in the industry. The Virgin experience is certainly unique, which is why we're proposing to implement RED, implement some different loyalty programs, and take the best of that without taking away from really what's made Alaska successful, so that people across America understand that Alaska Airlines really provides the absolute best in service.
Currently, in the merger, 40% of the routes for Virgin Airline, 40% of the Virgin Airline routes are overlapped with Alaska Airline. What impact does it have in your proposal and also on the size of the fleet?
Just to clarify, you're asking about the overlap between Virgin's existing routes and Alaska's existing routes? Okay.
So the strategy we're looking at is a larger organization for Alaska itself. So as a percentage for Alaska, it's a much lower percentage. And the Virgin gives us access to these gates that are east and westbound. So that's really the primary concern. As we target these customers, we're thinking with the new strategy, we should be able to increase our passenger demand by enough to offset that dip in the overlap.
When you talk about growing customers and growing the customer base, at what point do you see us having to lease more planes or more capacity?
It's an absolutely wonderful question, and I believe that in the long term you will have to explore adding to your fleet. We know that Virgin America, for example, was proposing a very aggressive expansion. However, we see this merger, and we've seen mergers like this happen before, and fail spectacularly in the short term. So our recommendation really focuses on managing the culture, managing the combination of those two systems, those two operations, to ensure that you position yourself to be ready to grow when the time is right. We didn't feel comfortable projecting very long-term growth because we understand that this is a very real time of need, and that needs to be managed carefully in the short term.
Do you have any ideas of the costs related to loyalty programs and how much it will impact our bottom line to now run a double loyalty program?
This is something that we certainly thought about and we explored. We did outlay a ongoing cost to manage the loyalty program in our presentation. What we're proposing to base it on with this double loyalty program is something similar to credit card loyalty program. So if I have a credit card, I can collect cash back or I can collect air miles. I may get different cash back on different purchases, but there's quite a bit of data about exactly how those rewards match with the different ways of collecting. So we think that simply having a two-tiered loyalty program shouldn't be that hard to implement, and it's really a value add for your customers.
I just want to follow up on the question that was asked a few minutes ago about name, because it does appear that you want to leverage the Virgin sort of sexiness, I guess, of the customers they attract. Did you consider at all the possibility of naming the airline Alaskan Virgin or Virgin Alaska?
Certainly was something that we talked about, but in that we are pursuing a strategy of sticking with Alaskan, we wanted to get away from the royalty paid to the Virgin Group. So although we think that that might have a positive benefit for this relatively smaller customer base of Virgin, we thought that the cost of paying that royalty overall outweighed that.
If one of our taglines is for the same price, you just get more, and you talked about starting to charge for the non-flight issues here, you know, the baggage, the meals, etc. Where doesn't that undermine everything we stand for in our culture?
No, that's not what we're suggesting. Realistically, the airline industry has shifted to this model. We believe that all the legacy carriers, perhaps except for Southwest, will charge additionally for these extra items. We really see this as the way the industry is going. So overall, we want to have a lower price than Southwest when people are buying their tickets to gain those customers, and then we can gain profitability through these additional charges.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just gonna remove this before the team comes.
Yeah, 15 minutes. Repeat everything again?
No, do it. Because the team needs to hear it. It's the second team.
Yeah, the rules and everything, right? I was so nervous the first time. I'm like,
Okay.
what?
I'm not gonna be in the room for the second one. Like, I'm gonna be at the beginning.
What is this?
Final
Okay.
second.
Where?
First key. I might be in my room sleeping.
Okay, so
There's gonna be
assign
Vinay.
someone. Who?
There's gonna be the tech guy, Vinay.
Where is he?
I think he's in the audience, so I'll see him. I'll tell him to
Tell him to come up with me when the comes up with me.
Okay.
Because I want him to do this properly.
All right.
I mean the other PowerPoint. This one here. Close this, open the other.
We will be beginning the presentations shortly. If everyone could take a seat, please. Thank you. So, Amanda.
He was here early. Oh, what's this thing? When I arrived, here and I go way back. I was the second. I know I graduated tonight because I went into the teeth. I graduated and got to the teeth of the section.
So I'll have the second, right? So you're on.
Yeah, and where's the clicker? The clicker's this one here. I'll just give a quick speech so that way you know the rules. Okay. And this is it. So this is forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, forward. So the clicker? You could try it out if you like.
Okay.
Beforehand. Okay. Yep. Right? Okay. And your presentation set up. All right. Welcome. Could everyone settle down? Thank you. Welcome to the 2017 John Molson MBA International Case Competition. My name is Connie Cusano, and I will be the coordinator of the presentation of Memorial University of Newfoundland. First, I would like to ask everyone to turn off any electronic devices and cell phones. I will now kindly ask our distinguished judges to introduce themselves.
My name is Nabil Beitinjane. I work for CGI in business intelligence.
Hi, Maryse Benhoff, President, BG Communications.
Michael Michaelberg, Managing Partner at the Luger Group. We're in real estate development.
Mark Dover, CEO of a group of entrepreneurial businesses based here and in Toronto.
My name is Diane Béliveau. I'm District Manager for Eastern Quebec at Export Development Canada.
I would like to remind Memorial University of Newfoundland that they will have a maximum of 25 minutes to present the case. I will indicate to the team when 5 minutes is remaining and when 1 minute is remaining. After the presentation, the judges will have a maximum of 15 minutes for questions. I will indicate to the judges when 1 minute is remaining. I would like to wish the presenting team good luck. Bienvenue au final du concours international d'études de cas MBA de John Molson 2017. Mon nom est Connie Cusano et je suis votre coordinatrice pour la présentation de Memorial University of Newfoundland. S'il vous plaît, éteignez tout appareil électronique ou téléphone cellulaire. Merci et bienvenue à nos juges qui se sont déjà présentés. Je veux souligner à l'université que l'équipe a un maximum de 25 minutes pour présenter son analyse. Je vais signaler à l'équipe lorsqu'il restera 5 minutes et puis quand il restera 1 minute. J'aimerais demander à l'équipe de m'indiquer qu'ils ont bien vu le signal. Après la présentation, le panel de juges a un maximum de 15 minutes pour des questions. Je vais signaler aux juges lorsqu'il restera 1 minute. J'aimerais souhaiter bonne chance à l'équipe. Vous pouvez maintenant commencer votre présentation. You can now begin your presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Tilden and transition team. Thank you so much for being with us here this afternoon. We are Signal Consulting, and we are here from Memorial University. So we'll start today's presentation with the agenda. So my name is Kate. I will be taking you through your mandate, key issues, objectives, and recommendation. Then I'll pass it over here to Nick for the analysis, Greg for your alternatives, Stephanie is your implementation specialist, back to me for risks and conclusion. So the mandate we've created for your company today, we really wanted to help you develop a strategy to ensure successful integration of Virgin America and Alaska Airlines, and as an additional benefit, help you sleep at night. So the key issues we've identified for your company, obviously competition is huge in your market with those 4 big players. Integration, so you have addressed that company culture, the IT systems, as well as the operational issues that you're having with those 2 separate airlines, as well as making sure that we help you manage those shareholder expectations. So the objectives we've created for you, realize that operational synergies between the 2 companies, increase revenue and profit, consistent customer service, so that's going to be very important moving forward for you, and strengthening that brand. So our recommendation for your company today is to build the Alaska Airlines brand while incorporating key components of Virgin America's strengths. I'll now pass it over to Nick for the analysis.
Thank you, Kate. So today I'll walk you through our analysis, and really the strategy that we've determined for your company really is rooted in a 3-pronged analysis approach that we undertook today. So starting with the internal analysis of both VA and AA, working into the integration synergies and hurdles that this acquisition entails, as well as looking at the external environment and the competition that's in the marketplace. So we'll start first with the internal review of the two companies. So not news to you. The strength and the growth of the two companies is very impressive over the past 5 years. So going from 2011 to 2015, seeing some significant revenue growth of 30% in AA and 39% in VA. So there's a lot of good things going on here, and we're here to help you keep pushing that forward and keep that revenue growth moving. So to look at the KPIs of the two companies, we're really showing here that Alaska, at the customer base of 32 million, fleet size of 223 relative to 64, and moving down through the financial metrics a little bit lower of $5.6 billion in revenue, to apologies, that's $300 million in revenue, apologies. It's the seat miles from 35,000 to 14,000. Alaska really is the sizable, more significant reach and the more significant scale of the two entities, and that's why today we've recommended the implementation plan of maintaining the Alaska brand and using some of the Virgin strengths to improve that. So to look at the competencies and culture, it's really important, as Kate mentioned, that the integration really does speak to culture and the competencies of the two companies. Alaska has a history of innovative technology and innovation, has an amazing record of customer experience and won so many awards and is rated very highly amongst the airlines in that respect. Streamlined cost structure, you've been able to manage your operational abilities very well to lower those costs. As I mentioned before, strong financial growth. And really what you're looking to do is give, for the same price, you get more. So very, very strong customer proposition that you are able to give to your customers. On the other side, the Virgin competencies, a unique and modern experience known for your innovation as well. Different target market, but again, award-winning service. Again, like I said before, strong financial growth. And the target market is a little bit younger and cheekier of a feeling for that airline. So looking at these two internal analyses and moving it into the creation of the synergies between the two. So what that does is between the two, when you combine them into the Alaska and Virgin, you gain all these synergies of the cultural growth and innovation. Very similar way of thinking in the two companies. Your strength in customer service, again, it's a strength of both companies and a core competency that you can bring together and really forge moving forward. That operational cost savings. Alaska has done a great job, like I said, at doing that in the past. And we can take some of these, what's been done in that area, and move it over to Virgin and completely improve that business model and the operational savings across the airlines. Being able to leverage both customer bases and the capacity of those airlines, as well as the route network with low crossover. So you're really buying into a bunch of new routes and capacity into those airports that are hard to break into. However, with all the synergies come some of the hurdles, and these speak back to what we're going to solve for you today in the implementation plan. There's issues with respect to merging two cultures and the personnel that go along with those cultures, the IT systems, the operational integration as well, being different types of planes and whatnot, as well as deciding which way to go with the branding. It's important to view this merger with respect to where you fall within the competition. So you can see here in the top right, we've got Virgin and Alaska, a little bit of a higher cost, but very, very strong customer service, like I spoke to earlier. And you can see the other four major players kind of moving down the 2x2 here towards the bottom left. With the acquisition, however, Alaska becomes a bigger airline, so that the size of the bubble there is with respect to the relative size of the businesses. And you really have this market you could play into yourself. That's your own space that you really provide value to. And we're going to keep you playing in that area, but just a stronger competition. Looking externally on what's been done in the past, there's been issues with respect to mergers in the past. So we've really broken down the Continental United merger that really did fail previously. It was driven by financial instability, and they had issues with IT systems integration. They really underestimated the complexity. You, with the two systems that are relatively similar, have a leg up on that. However, we want to make sure that we're doing that in the right way. The culture, they ignored this as an issue, and with respect to the unions, they had significant difficulty in combining unions. They actually grounded flights because pilots couldn't even be flying when they were supposed to be. So this is what could go wrong, and we're here to answer what could go right. So now I'll pass it over to Greg to walk through the alternatives.
Thank you, Nick. So as a transition team for this merger, you're sort of faced with the crossroads of which path to take. So we really saw four separate paths here that you can take in terms of your strategic alternatives. You can remain to keep the two brands separate and remain to operate them as separate without really forming any much integration between them. You could maintain the Virgin brand and carry that forward with the strengths that it has. You could develop a brand new brand, something that doesn't really exist on the market today, and something that's different than both of your two existing brands. The last alternative there would be to sort of maintain that Alaska brand and leverage that. So we looked at these and took sort of a pros and cons approach to each of these. Maintaining separate brands, you'll be able to maintain that brand equity and those loyal customers that you have to both your Alaska and your Virgin brands. However, with keeping those separate, very unlikely that you'll see much operational benefit, and then you'll sort of have two completely separate culture silos there, and your cultural integration in any merger is very, very important for your people. So developing a new brand, you could really leverage those operational synergies. However, you run the risk of losing a lot of the brand equity that you've built with both the Alaska brand and the Virgin brand. If you were to go forward and use a Virgin brand, they do have a good culture. It's a very innovative culture, and it's something that's very trendy, and you do have a customer base based on that. However, that customer base is limited compared to the Alaska brand, and there is a higher operational cost associated with the Virgin brand as opposed to the Alaska, which is more streamlined. Using the Alaska brand, you will have a larger customer base, and the operational costs are better. However, you do lose that sort of trendy Virgin brand that's been so successful. So we really compared these against and sort of grounding each of these alternatives in the four key objectives that we set out at the beginning, being the operational synergies, revenue and profitability, customer service, and having a strong brand. So being separate, we really saw those, keeping those separate, you really don't get the operational synergies, and it would be very, very unlikely to get the revenue and profitability benefits that you're looking for. By developing a new brand, you could get more synergies, but you would have to build a brand from the ground up and be more difficult to do. By maintaining the Virgin brand, you don't get those operational synergies. The profitability is not quite as good on the Virgin brand, but you do have strong customer service. What we really saw as being the primary approach for your organization and your transition team would be to maintain that Alaska brand going forward. You'll be able to accomplish those synergies as well as leveraging your profitability and your customer service. There are going to be some challenges with the brand, but we feel we address that in the implementation plan that we've developed. So again, our recommendation here is to build upon the Alaska Airlines brand while incorporating some of those key components that have been so successful in the Virgin America brand and their strengths. I'll now pass it over to Stephanie to take you through the exciting implementation plan that we've developed for your team.
You've made an extremely wise acquisition, and we're very excited to be here with you today to talk about how to make the best of that moving forward. And we're going to talk to you a lot about what good looks like, but let's take a moment and think about what bad could look like. A lot of folks are talking about maintaining both brands and the value in that Virgin brand. Being cool is tricky. As anyone who ever went to high school can tell you, and anyone who ever tried to maintain a brand based on being hip, that's a tricky dice to roll, and who knows when mood lighting is going to go out of style. So what we're talking about is building the Alaska brand. You have strong customer service. You're known for it. You have chops. And being on time for your kid's hockey game is never going to go out of style. We're going to talk a lot about branding today, but it's not just about branding. It's about integration. Bad looks like trying to maintain both brands, weak brands that are costing you a lot of money in marketing, logistics, integration. So we're very excited about putting all your resources behind the Alaska brand and putting that great team. You have some really great resources and folks that are going to help with the path forward and really helping that brand take off. We want to touch on the milestones. So first of all, making that announcement and really getting shareholders understanding of what you see as the path forward. A lot of questions right now are around what are you going to do with those brands? That's going to build confidence in choosing a direction that's going to minimize costs, which is so incredibly important in this industry. In the medium term, from 2017 to 2020, That's when you're going to start integrating those services from Virgin that can build value for your Alaskan customers, as well as starting to cross-sell. Again, also combining operations to get a single operating certificate is another one of those milestones that you have outlined in terms of bringing your operations together and getting those cost savings. In 2020 is a key year because that's when your leases for your Virgin planes will start to expire. And that's when we recommend that those planes are transitioned and that everything moving forward operates under the Alaska brand name. So we're going to talk to you a little about that transition and how you're going to help use that transition time to grow sales and really build revenue. First of all, the brand decision is a very important one in terms of choosing Virgin brand versus Alaska. You have brand equity. Right now, you have 32 million customers. Virgin has a smaller customer base, so you have larger customers that are aware of your brand, as well as some amazing ratings. The Wall Street Journal ranked you #1 as an airline scorecard. So again, that's fantastic, positive brand equity that you can build from, and with things that matter to a lot of people. So whether it's being on time for your kid's hockey game because your flights are on time more often, you get the baggage to your travelers quickly, or if it is your Silicon Valley customer, he wants to get to TechCrunch on time and make his pitch. These are important things that are not going to go out of style. As well as you have the lowest customer complaints. So again, you have the chops to build that brand. Crafting a culture. So we believe that the Virgin, combining the Virgin team with Alaska is actually going to be a pivotal way to build that culture. So being open and honest about next steps while creating excitement. So we'll talk a bit more about how you can create special teams around some of these key issues such as branding to build that culture. And these folks are up for a challenge. Both companies have been growing, they're innovative, and they're type A. They want to win, and we're going to give them an exciting challenge. You rock with Richard, but are you ready to help take Alaska Airlines take off? This is an invitation to join the team. We're looking for the best and the brightest to help build the Alaska brand. You're hip, we're friendly. We think that works together. And together, we can give our customers more. So we're all about giving our customers more, so integrating services, as well as the brand and how we work with things like how the crew present during the flight. We wanted to take a look at Virgin services offering and which ones we would want to incorporate into Alaska's business and in what time frame. So we've ranked each service on value for the customer, cost, and then prioritize the services. So starting with the loyalty program. So you have already integrated that, and that's been a great move that we'll leverage later in the plan. Crew service. So Virgin's done some really nice, easy things. You're known for your friendly services. You've made a fun safety video. Alaska's safety video might look a little different, but we think that's something you can do as well. One brand to keep your eye on would be WestJet in Canada. Combining that friendly and that service offering has built a really nice, unique area for them to play in, and we think you have all the strengths to play in a similar space. Secondly, information technology. So the wearable technology that Virgin has introduced for its staff. Some major benefits there. The crew's ability on Virgin to tell a customer if they're going to make their connection. We've all been in that boat. You're sweating. You go up and say, do you know if I'm going to make my connection? They say, oh, please go to the desk when you get to the airport, and they will tell you. And it's an uncomfortable spot. So having your crew be able to give real-time updates to your staff, we thought that was a great investment that, based on lower cost in terms of just wearable technology and not into the planes themselves, is something that you can implement in the medium term. As well as that red entertainment. So instead of streaming TV, again, if anyone's flown early in the morning is probably the worst. There's not a lot on TV, so depending on the time of day that you're flying. And Virgin really has created a resource center that we, in the long term, would recommend that you work into your flights. And again, certain things like the chef menu are not things that will provide that, we would believe that are going to add costs that are not going to provide that great incremental value for your customers. Cross-selling from Virgin to Alaska is going to be extremely important. So we're going to have a couple of years where Virgin will continue to operate until the leases end. And we want to get those people familiar with the Alaska brand and start increasing revenue on Alaska flights. So we'll talk about the three-pronged strategy here. First of all, cross-branding Virgin Airlines. So in the meantime, on low-cost items like ticketing, the website will start to say, Virgin Airlines brought to you by Alaska Airlines. We're not going to paint any planes. Again, we're very cost-conscious in this strategy, but felt we could start to bring those brands together. Furthermore, we'll implement combined flight searches. So if a Virgin customer goes to the Virgin website and is searching for flights, we'll also show them available Alaska flights and vice versa. So again, just bringing those flight options to the forefront and starting to cross-sell. And then lastly, we have a plan through your loyalty program to provide credits for heavy Virgin Atlantic users to try Alaska Airlines. So to entice our Virgin customers to come fly with Alaska, and we're going to go after heavy customers, so high potential revenue, frequent flyers, we're going to give a $100 credit to come try an Alaskan flight. So a $100 credit to the top 10% of flyers, so that's 400,000 customers that we're going to give this credit to again, cross-sell and start to increase traffic. New customers. Part of this growth as well, so as we're, in the future, we're going to have more routes in more cities, we're going to want to make sure that during this time period, we're also growing our customer base outside. So we would recommend some really targeted airport advertising online for travel, really highlighting that price and service model proposition. So we would recommend at the baggage claim, you'd have signage to say, fly with Alaska, you're on your way in 20 minutes and home to your kids. So really highlighting those unique service propositions that you've been able to give to your customers. Oops. Another important topic we wanted to speak to you about today is your flight and route transition. So as I've touched on, 2020 is a really pivotal year, and this is when you're going to start to realize some additional cost synergies. So as your Virgin Atlantic leases expire, we'd recommend that you move to one type of aircraft. So go with Alaskan's Boeing 737. So again, minimizing operations and complexity to save cost, as well as each of those routes would then be transitioned to an Alaskan route. So that's why it's so important in the meantime, we're building that understanding that's a common airline, and as well as creating trial. A number of other areas that we want to touch on that will be important as you move forward in terms of your operational integrations. First of all is IT systems. And again, this is where you have made a really wise choice with choosing Virgin Atlantic. You both use the common Sabre system, and that is going to minimize any difficulties moving forward, but will need to be monitored. Another issue we've seen in airline mergers in the past has been with unions. So again, starting new collective agreements immediately and consolidating those operations, as well as procurement. So making sure that you're looking for better fuel contracts across both entities immediately and all other economies of scale. We've touched on some key initiatives today, and I want to talk about areas where you can bring together special teams of the Virgin Atlantic folks and Alaskan Airlines to really take on those key issues and move the company forward. So we've talked about building a brand, building culture, services integration, logistics and IT, union negotiations, and purchasing. So again, from existing staff, but just finding your best and brightest to move the company forward across all these thrusts. I'm now going to pass it over to Nick, who's going to take you through what good looks like and the financials.
Thank you, Stephanie. So as Stephanie mentioned, we're recommending some investments in some different types of programs to really push operational savings as well as revenue growth. So working through 2017 through 2023, we're going to be investing in loyalty program inputs. So that's the giving free trial to the Virgin Atlantic customers. Some advertising, as she mentioned. The estimate of current integration costs being $350 million, we've kept that in there. We've also added some additional integration costs based on some of the recommendations that we've made with respect to, specifically in 2020, being the rebranding of the planes and whatnot. So on a total level, we're estimating significant upfront outlays of $425 million, all the way working through $30 million annually on a run rate, plus the extra 25 in 2020. So really, what does good look like? And we really believe there's a lot of potential here, and you'll see that in our projections. So this is the two major areas that we feel we can make a significant difference for your company. Operational savings being the top line, the green line, and revenue growth being the bottom. So this is based on what we're recommending here today. We believe you can move operational savings to a level of $654 million by 2023. Incremental revenue up to $263 million. And that operational savings goal of reaching that 90% operational savings of your estimated $225 million, we believe you can hit that in 2018 based on what we're recommending here. So the financial model we created also developed profitability scenarios through 2023. So based on the budget that we're inputting, and the revenue and operational savings that we've forecasted, we believe that there's a potential of a high growth projection hitting $1.1 billion in net incremental profitability by 2023, medium scenario of $887 million, and the low scenario of $665 million. What this does, it really helps you recover that $4 billion deal value by 2023. So we feel like that's a reasonable payback period for the very smart investment that you made in Virgin Atlantic. So now I'll pass it back to Kate to walk you through the risks and mitigations.
Thank you, Nick. So with any plan, obviously comes risks. So the risks that we've identified for your company today, obviously competition is number one. That's always going to be high, and we really feel that by leveraging your, if it was someone to play in that market, that you would leverage that unique value proposition that we've created for you today. The economy, that's always a risk. That 2001, again in 2008, that's medium. So we would recommend streamlining routes and maintaining that low-cost structure. Low conversion. So if those Virgin airline users don't convert to Alaska users, we would recommend they're increasing that marketing around building your brand. So in the beginning, we talked about objectives, and I'd just like to revisit this for a second to show you exactly how we feel we've met these objectives for you. So realizing those operational synergies by eliminating those redundancies and then the procurement scale. Increasing revenue and profit, so that larger route network, consistent customer service, that's training and developing that Stephanie talked about, and strengthening that brand, differentiating on your services. That now concludes our presentation. We now welcome any questions that you do have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. You talked about crafting a new brand, a new culture, sorry, crafting a new culture. Can you tell me a little bit more about what this culture will be?
Right now, one of the commonalities we would see in the cultures across Virgin and Alaska is really driven in improvement in technology. What we might want to build in a little from Virgin is a little bit of personality. We think Alaska has some great associations. They're different. It's not about being hip. I think it's about customer service and not having traffic jams. It's about relaxed. It's getting sugar from your neighbor. But we think the Virgin team can help bring that personality through the brand and even through the organization. But still with that type A driven approach. So that was where we really saw that going.
What do you see as a next step for the company? I mean, it's not a lot of debt relative to the industry, and you have a very aggressive recovery period. What do we do after this? We're still only a little over 6% of the market share.
Thanks, great question. One of the things that we really saw you were getting in this acquisition was access to new routes into some of those key airports. So with the acquisition and looking at that map, you have some really great coverage, and we see that frequency of flights would be your next play. So increasing frequency on your routes.
I spent a lot of money on Virgin, almost $4 billion if you include the debt and the leasing fees. And it sounds like you are primarily looking at maintaining the Alaska brand. How do I make sure that all those customers that are now traveling on Virgin stay with us, given the sort of the different feel for the airline?
That's an argument we had a little bit when we went through our analysis, and we really feel that taking the brand from Virgin and maintaining that brand and slowly transitioning the brand to the Alaska Airlines will keep your Virgin customers with your brand for the midterm, and then keep them understanding what Alaska truly brings when they're able to use the Virgin brand for the midterm and then converting them over to the long term.
So just as a follow-up, do you have any plans for sort of a splash of advertising to have the customer understand who we are now that we've merged?
That would be actually a great kind of a pivotal thing, I think, in terms of our advertising. So it's about being a little more defined. I think we've been a little straightforward in terms of what we're saying, but making sure that we're building that brand around customer service and friendliness, but being a little cheeky and comparing ourselves to those other airlines, because we do have the numbers and the service levels to back that up.
Yeah, and just to add quickly, we've allocated $10 million in each year for that advertising to make sure the customer is aware of that transition, yes.
mentioned competition a number of times in the presentation, but I'd like to know what is your plan to help us compete and go get some more market share?
Yeah, it's a great question as well. I think that unique value proposition that both Alaska and Virgin have to offer, by being a bigger player, you're going to be in more airports. You're going to have more routes. You're going to start. People are going to start recognizing your brand a little bit more. Once you start moving to more of a nationwide brand, as opposed to what Alaska now is really seen as being a regional brand, sort of a West Coast brand. But as they start seeing those Alaska planes, heading due to the east-west routes, people are going to sort of recognize them more as an option for their travel options.
When you talk about integration costs, you bumped up the numbers to 425, yet I'm still not clear from the presentation, what's the 350, what's the additional 25, and the other numbers that were put there?
One thing that when we reviewed your company's history, we noticed is that you're always investing in the next area of customer service, looking forward in technology. And what you've also acquired with Virgin is some ideas. So instead of developing your own pipeline, we actually analyzed their service offering, and then I identified a couple of areas for investment. So the first investment would be in that wearable technology for the staff. So for all of the crews to be able to have information for all their passengers on connections, local weather, and other really important information. So that was the first investment. The second investment was in your on-flight technology in terms of the entertainment system. So we really felt those were the next two investments that you likely would have developed your own funnel, but within Virgin you have that available, and at a lower cost can bring that onto your flights. So those were the two investments.
I'll be seeing Bombardier tonight at the banquet, and they're going to try and sell me their new C-Series aircrafts. What should I tell them, and why?
I think that the operational savings going forward are really going to be due to having uniform maintenance and whatnot, and being able to train your employees on specific aircraft. So rationalizing that fleet down to what we recommended in the Boeing side of things, I think it's well recognized in the airline industry that minimizing that breadth of airplane and the manufacturing and operations that go along with it is going to minimize your cost structure. And I believe that the manufacturers do understand that that's generally how it is benefited to the airline companies.
Yeah, and if I could add to that as well, Alaska made a very large investment in the purchasing of a lot of your aircrafts. Virgin leased a lot of their aircrafts, and a lot of those leases are coming up in 2020. And we really saw that where you made that large investment in the purchase of those aircrafts, it was something that you guys did for the long haul. And I think once those leases are up in 2020, I think you can really leverage that to get better service agreements, better maintenance agreements, things like that with Boeing that you know that you're into for the long haul.
I know you showed it in the alternatives, but I still am struggling with the idea that the legacy carriers are building stripped-down economy carriers and the more full-featured brand. And couldn't we do that with Alaska and VA?
Sorry, just to clarify, was your question, do you think that we could maintain both brands?
Yeah, and build them as very separate type of experiences, but get the synergies that we forecast.
There were a number of, and we looked at this in depth, so I welcome my colleagues to jump in here as well, but there were a number of costs that we just felt we couldn't minimize with two operators. So fleet, different aircrafts, marketing costs, just a number of services that we felt were going to mitigate our ability to cut costs, as well as to build one brand. So in terms of Alaska's a 5% market share right now, and by integrating operations, it's going to help you grow behind that one strong brand versus trying to maintain two brands and one that we feel is tricky to maintain.
Yeah, and if I could add to that as well, our firm works a lot with mergers. One of the things that we've seen in the industry is that one of the determining factors with mergers is often when you have those siloed cultures. Daimler Chrysler is a great example of that. Two great companies that came together, saw a lot of synergies, but they were never really able to bring together the culture because they did have two separate offerings that really didn't play in the same space. So we thought that, you know, it's something that your company needs to focus on, is to try to bring those cultures together and not have those silos, because if you have a siloed culture within a new merged company, you're almost bound to failure.
I believe you're suggesting we maintain some of the, or not maintain, but bring over some of the premium services that Virgin was offering into the merged airline for Alaska. And I'm wondering if you can comment on what do we do with our fare structure? I mean, it sounds like we're going to have increased costs, and if we're trying to compete and have the fares lower, isn't that going to hurt profitability ultimately?
What our goal would be for you is to continue to decrease your costs in the long term so you can invest in services. And that's something that we saw as a real core competency of your company in running that business and being really lean. So that would be our recommendation, is to aim to keep fares consistent with inflation, but make sure that you're cutting your costs at the bottom line to invest in those services.
Okay, so I'm confused again. I think it was the second or third slide in, you had the breakdown of all the different carriers and positioned Alaska and Virgin in the high cost. And at the end, you come back and you're telling us we're low cost. And we want to keep low cost because that's what attracts our clientele. So which is it?
Sorry, that fair challenge, and really it's high cost from a fares perspective. So instead of high cost, maybe premium. However, on the operational side, we're relatively lean and low cost. So that's the difference.
When you talk about, well, in the first couple of years leading up to 2020, could you elaborate on where the integration costs would be coming from, or synergies, to be more precise? How would we hit the targets we have?
Yeah, I think one of the advantages that we saw with going from two smaller scale companies to really a mid-size company is that you're going to be able to have a better negotiating position, for instance, with maintenance providers, with airports in terms of getting access fees. Another benefit would be fuel. In the airline industry, a large percentage of your costs are around fuel. We saw that by being able to increase the size of your company essentially overnight, you could negotiate with the fuel provider companies to get better discounts and to be able to service both the Alaska and the Virgin aircraft at the airports.
Yeah, and just to add briefly to that as well, the route redundancy is about 6.6%. So we believe that increasing the load factor on certain planes that are already flying and have excess capacity, there's savings associated with not running the second plane and just increasing the load factor from those redundant destinations.
What do we do with the license fee of 0.7%? How do we calculate? It's a 0.7% of revenues. How do we calculate that during the phasing out of the Virgin Airlines into Alaska Airlines?
So again, a great question. And what we believe is that we'll have to consult the legal team, obviously, on what's required. And we have built in the associated savings into the model in 2020. So we've built in what we've assumed as the revenue for the current routes that Virgin does fly.
What are the number one elements in the synergy that can be fast-tracked so that we please our shareholders?
I think one thing that your organization needs to focus on is that IT system, because that was one thing that really crippled the United and Continental merger, was that they had two separate IT systems. Integrating those together, they really underestimated that, and it essentially resulted in nationwide groundings of flights. And their system crashed multiple times. So that was a huge loss of revenue for them. You have two very similar systems. There's a slight discrepancy in the versions. We didn't see that as being a difficult thing to overcome, but you would want to focus on that. So by being able to integrate those IT systems, we thought that you would be able to see some efficiencies there in terms of your booking systems and that. Another thing that you would want to fast track is your people. So looking at your back office, your corporate, things like that, you really want to be open and honest with people and let people know where they stand and if they're at risk, for instance, for being a redundancy. And use sensitivity in that, of course, but trying to get to that and get that transition as smooth as possible would be a key objective for you as well.
Did you consider at all, and do you think there's any value in creating a name that has both Alaska and Virgin in it?
We did. We really did feel that while there are synergies in the culture and in terms of some of the service offerings, we felt that the brands were far apart. So from Alaska to Virgin in terms of hip and more customer service, maybe older traveler, we just didn't feel that there was a way to bring those together without kind of ruining both, to really, I guess, sum it up.
And we also saw if you were to continue with the Virgin name, that it would be a risk that you would have to continue that royalty structure with the Virgin Corporation.
You touched upon new routes in your presentation vaguely. Could you elaborate?
Sure. So I spoke to Roots, and what we really are recommending, so what we felt that you have purchased with this acquisition is great route coverage of North America. And what we are suggesting, it's more of a transition. So as Virgin leases expire, those routes will be transitioned to Alaska. And then where we really see the growth coming is from frequency along those routes, while obviously monitoring for new routes and new opportunities, but really about transitioning and then frequency growth in the near future.
How do you see the transition team working together?
Thank you. Great question. And there's a number of transition teams. We really feel it's important to give people that big goal and create some challenges and just look for people across the organization that we know are motivated and up for the challenge and really put together a fairly even split of people to work on those teams. So the people that are motivated, up for the challenge, and want to be part of this new organization moving forward. And that's something that we can do in the short term.
And I think, if I could add to that, I think you made a great choice and a great first step in having both the CEOs of Alaska and Virgin being on that I guess that top level transition team. And we saw that as being a great first step in showing the people from your Virgin business that it's not all about just becoming Alaska, that they're really being brought into the fold and they're really being part of it. And we really feel that cascading that down and having representation from both organizations on those transition teams would be very beneficial.
Thank you.
devient très animé, ça marche, ça devient très animé. Non, parce que surtout que ben, les gens ont des visions différentes, à moins qu'il y ait une équipe avec qui close both of the areas. Peut-être, mais complètement différent dans nos opinions. Ouais. Des fois, c'est long, d'autres fois, il y a des fois, je pense que les années, on était venu, en 10-20 minutes, on avait fini. Chef d'expérience, parce que oui, oui. Oui, oui. Oui, ça, oui, c'est ça, ça t'étire. Oui, mais chaque personne amène des bons points parce qu'il y a des personnes qui sont dans différents domaines. C'est plus dans la planification, dans le HR, des choses comme ça. Moi, je suis plus dans la finance, je vais avoir des chiffres, des choses comme ça. C'est ça qui fait. Ça arrive de midi, on va aller. Yeah, it's a 10 minutes. Which one? No. Oh, yes, I agree. When time's up, time's up. Yeah.
Well, she sat in the back rather than stalking
Yeah.
Because I was like, I didn't know, I was going to go like this, and I was like, oh, okay.
No, it was fine to ask the question, but when they were done, there's no, they passed on to a second person.
So if it happens again, in the spirit of making sure that
How do I do this?
Did you get it?
I'm scared. It's so cold in here.
She comes over. Yeah, she comes over. Yeah, she does. You can't. You can't.
I
No.
can't.
Okay, I'll ask her to.
make sure that
I'm
Yeah.
people will fire me so
Yeah.
soon. I can't even use a photo
Or at least a personal, whatever the.
no, you're the lead judge. At the end of the day,
Where's the clip?
We didn't know who it was.
Oh, right there. Here.
you're the lead judge. And I'll make sure that she sees it.
Okay. So we fix that point. So let's get Michael back. Crown.
Well, for the process, yeah, exactly. The process is important, and when we go into the drinks, that's important. Just
Oh, we just go force it. No, because there's no the feedback is win, lose, whatever. That's it. Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Fixed.
All right, so in terms of leading the deliberation, etc.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm
Casting
talking
vote.
about.
Yeah, the casting vote.
Yeah, no, it's just
No.
or you're the lead judge.
I'm the lead.
So we had nominated. We all
had a
came here. We said,
revolution.
"Who's the lead judge? Who's the lead judge?" And
And we were
we're
like-
all looking at each other, not knowing. So we said, "Well, you're the oldest."
We gave it to her. So what we'll do is, there was a revolution when you were gone. The people have decided.
Just so
Leadership. No, but we're egalitarian.
So which schools did you judge this week? Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's, yeah. Usually that's what I do when I'm undecided, or let's go down, and then the numbers are going to tell us, yeah, because I've done it once where we go down and we realize, shit, the numbers don't add up. Yeah.
Sometimes it even tells you there's a big cat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. 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 Yeah. I think we can actually take it.
I like the case. This is a good case for a product.
I love this case. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love this case because any option, yes, and any option as long as you do it good.
You can show, you can look as neat as you want, you
Yeah.
can say it as high as you want.
Well, I think you can stay high, but you gotta have some depth to support your.
This is where we slide.
Yes, 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 exactly.
This is when we go back to, this is how I saw it, you know. That was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Depth. Oh. They're bringing them on a computer. Maybe we should get 3 computers.
Some smart teams have annexes that they won't show you the information, but you ask a question, and it's all prepared. But,
Can everyone please begin to take a seat? We will begin shortly.
obvious question, rather than put in the case and spend so much time on it, they'll have it, yeah, they know that a judge will ask. So that adds 5 minutes or
Aha.
Oh, I can do that. Yes, yes. So we'll move this way.
The revolution.
Yeah, there's been a coup while you were out.
Mutiny.
I don't know why.
What happens when you leave?
You could step off stage.
Oh, okay.
Clicker?
Yep. Yeah.
I'm assuming green is advanced?
Yeah. Would you like to try it out before you start?
No, because, actually, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
All right. Ready? Welcome to the final of the 2017 John Molson MBA International Case Competition. My name is Connie Cusano, and I will be the coordinator for the presentation of Queensland University of Technology Graduate School of Business. First, I would like to ask everyone to turn off any electronic devices or cell phones. I will now kindly ask our distinguished judges to please introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Diane Béliveau. I'm a district manager for Eastern Quebec at Export Development Canada.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Dover. I'm the CEO of a group of entrepreneurial businesses based here and in Toronto.
Michael Michaelberg, managing partner at the Luger Group. We're a real estate development company.
Maryse Benhoff, President, BG Communications.
Nabil Beitinjani. I work for CGI, an IT outsourcer in business intelligence.
I would like to remind Queensland University of Technology that they will have a maximum of 25 minutes to present the case. I will indicate to the team when they have 5 minutes remaining and 1 minute remaining. After the presentation, the judges will have a maximum of 15 minutes to ask questions. I will indicate to the judges when they have 1 minute remaining. I would like to wish the presenting team good luck. Bienvenue au final du concours international d'études de cas MBA de John Molson 2017. Mon nom est Connie Cusano et je suis votre coordonnatrice pour la présentation de l'Université Queensland University of Technology Graduate School of Business. S'il vous plaît, éteignez tout appareil électronique ou téléphone cellulaire. Merci et bienvenue à nos juges qui se sont déjà présentés. Je veux souligner à l'université que l'équipe a un maximum de 25 minutes pour présenter son analyse. Je vais signaler à l'équipe lorsqu'il restera 5 minutes, puis encore 1 minute. J'aimerais demander à l'équipe de m'indiquer qu'ils ont bien vu le signal. Après la présentation, le panel de juges a un maximum de 15 minutes pour des questions. Je vais signaler au juge lorsqu'il restera 1 minute. J'aimerais souhaiter bonne chance à l'équipe. Vous pouvez maintenant commencer votre présentation. You may now begin your presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today. I must admit my colleagues and I are quite excited about the opportunity that lies ahead for Alaskan Airlines and this potential and the merger that's just taken place. We do believe that there is a bit of uncertainty. However, we're confident. We do believe there's a bit of uncertainty moving ahead. Now, as we understand, you've asked 3 different consulting groups to come and advise you on this issue, but we feel that through our thorough analysis of the problem and our recommendations, that the most successful, advantageous partnership will be with QUT Real World Consulting. So let's have a look at the problem as we see it. How does Alaskan Airlines successfully merge with Virgin America in order to hit these 4 key points? And what we're looking at is combining your operations efficiently, avoiding brand equity loss, reaping the synergy of the cultures of the 2 businesses, which we do believe has real potential, and also creating exceptional value for your shareholders, which ultimately is really the bottom line. So in order to analyze this, we'd like you to imagine what the future could potentially hold for you in the business. So Alaskan Airlines has successfully leveraged the merger with Virgin America. You've increased revenue by in excess of 115% over a 3-year period. You've got significant growth in brand equity, and we're also able to make you the go-to airline for a multitude of market segments. So in order to realize this future, I'd like to run you through a bit of an understanding of our strategy moving forward. So the key pillars of our strategy are a rebrand of Virgin America, creating synergies between the 2 cultures of Alaskan Airlines and the new rebranded Virgin America, a cross-pollination between the 2 businesses to create exceptional operational efficiencies. And we do believe that there's some very complementary internal capabilities that we can leverage off. And improve the entire customer experience for every market segment that both brands currently cater to. So we'd like to introduce you to a new concept. We'd like to introduce Alaskan Advantage Airlines. Now, in order to run through this strategy in a great more detail, I'd like to introduce the team who will be assisting me with this. So starting with Arbus, Sarah and Cameron. And today we're going to cover the following points. We're going to run through the external factors that exist within the industry, which have a great deal of effect on your business and this merger. We'll run through the internal capabilities that both businesses have. Following from there, we'll run you through a suite of options that we've developed and really analyzed to the nth degree. And what we've come up with is that recommended strategy and a lot more detail. From there, we'll run through the value proposition and how we intend to allow you to create more value for the business and the customer. The implementation strategy, running through some key tactics, some risk mitigations, etc., and of course, how much it will cost and how much you'll get in return. From here, I'd like to pass you over to my colleague Arbus, who will run you through the external factors, which we've identified as being the real drivers within the industry and the things that we need to be most wary of. Arbus?
Lovely. Thank you, Justin.
Hello.
So we've identified three very important trends in the market. First one is the technology trend. We believe that there is integration software is actually becoming more accessible and cost effective. And this actually affects businesses in the operational space. The next trend that we've identified is within the economics space. The first one there is volatility in fuel prices. So as you might know, in 2010, the price of oil was roughly around $100 US, and at the end of 2015, it went down to as low as 40 and just a little bit underneath that per barrel. So that affects the operational expenditures of businesses, particularly yours in airlines. The next economic trend that we've identified in there is there's definitely more mergers and acquisitions occurring due to disruption. And what that means is firms are starting to consolidate with others to create more operational efficiencies and to gain more value as well. The last trend over there is social. There's definitely an increase in air travel as a preference of choice, and that's between private or even business uses as well. Which leads on to the second point. There's been obviously an increase in globalisation, so companies are no longer in just one city. They're in multiple cities in multiple countries, which obviously means that employees are working across states, across borders as well. The third point over there is the differentiated market across the US. Obviously, in different areas, there's the east, the west, and then there's little pockets in other areas that have different requirements. The customers have different requirements. And the very last one there is actually quite interesting. It's the millennial priorities are actually changing. They're no longer wanting to buy houses straight away when they turn 18, 20. They want to own businesses and run businesses. So that changes the dynamic, similarly to the differentiated markets, changes the dynamics of how they do their work. They may need to travel to other cities, and transportation is going to be a choice, will be a choice in their decision making. So with the external influences, the very top one there is different demographics, as I mentioned previously. We've identified in the airline industry, there's tech-savvy adults, millennial youngsters, and also folksy traditionals. This is very important as the market segment demands differ between all three of these. But the impact to this is we identify this as a positive impact. And it has the potential to maximise value by accessing multiple segments, so catering your product towards those markets. The next one is brand awareness, and that's increasing and maintaining your reputation. That is more so the public looking at your brand more so than what you think of it yourselves. We see this as a positive impact because it's all about keeping customers and growing that market share as much as we can. The last one there is the big four airlines. This is obviously quite important because they give you competitive rivalry. The impact that this has is we feel it's a negative impact because it has they have the potential to increase the competitiveness with the size and scale that they already have. From here, I'd like you to take focus on one point, and that's the very first one: different demographics. And the potential for it to maximise the value in accessing multiple segments. This here will assist in delivering understanding how you can gain more value in your business through the different products offerings. So I'd like to pass you on to Sarah, who will now run you through the internal and options analysis.
So following on from the external analysis, what we've done is had a look at both Alaskan Airlines and Virgin America to have a look at what are the internal capabilities that are critical for shaping the future strategy. So as you can see on the left here, we've got 5 really critical key capabilities. They're reliability, innovation, destinations, brand reputation, and internal cultural value. So if we first have a look at Alaskan Airlines, really in terms of reliability, we've got operational excellence. You actually rank among the best of all your competitors. In terms of innovation, really Alaskan Airlines is much more focused on a very strong customer experience, as is Virgin America. Alaskan has more extensive destinations compared to Virgin America, which is somewhat limited in the American space. Brand reputation across both differs, and it differs because in Alaskan Airlines, really, you're a reliable, respectable brand, whereas with Virgin, you're really young, stylish, and a bit more flamboyant. And in terms of internal cultural value, what we've identified with Virgin is that there's a strong alignment of staff to the brand, to the name, really, of Virgin. So what we did with this is we had to think about what are the synergies between these internal analysis and where can each company essentially help the other. So if you can see by the blue arrows, what we're really talking about here in terms of reliability, we believe there's a huge value add to Virgin America in terms of that operational excellence. In terms of destinations, the inclusion of Virgin really opens up a whole range of destinations for Virgin. But we do believe that Virgin can add a lot of value in terms of internal culture to Alaskan Airlines. And then we've got these key bits of synergy. So what we believe is that by combining and through this merger, what you're able to do is vastly increase and improve the customer experience and leverage both brand reputations to create an even greater brand reputation in the industry. Based on this analysis, what we've done is explored a few options for you. Now, I'm going to run you through those. But what we've done is basically take the problem, the external factors, and the internal capabilities to identify 4 key success factors. So in terms of these options, we're really looking at how do they contribute to these. And those are company value, brand reputation, operational efficiencies, and cultural impact. So let's have a look. We've identified 4 key options, 4 key pathways that you may take. Now, the first is creating a new, unified brand. The second is maintaining the status quo with the 2 brands as they exist today. The third is to absorb the Virgin American brand into Alaskan Airlines. And the fourth is to rebrand Virgin America, to align it more with the Alaskan Airlines values, but to still create those synergies of the internal capabilities. So as I mentioned, we've assessed these options against these 4 key criteria, and I'll just run you through that now. In terms of a unifying brand, so basically this is dissolving both brands and creating a completely new one. We've assessed really that this will actually devalue the company, to be perfectly honest, because you've got a significant capital investment required in rebranding. And not only that, your brand reputation also goes down because you have to essentially relaunch and then you lose the value and the equity in the brand. So really based on that initial company value assessment, we're recommending that you do not pursue this option. In terms of option 2, maintaining the status quo, so this is the current brands as they exist, we don't see too much positive or negative change on the company value. There's no investment in rebranding, but you've identified some operational inefficiencies that will occur if you do actually maintain the status quo. So in terms of that operational inefficiency, we see that that will cost the company quite a fortune. So we're actually recommending that you do not pursue this option because of that very factor. Our third option is to completely absorb the Virgin American brand into Alaskan Airlines. So essentially, VA ceases to exist. In terms of your company value, what we believe is that your overall value is likely to increase. And you've potentially, though, lost revenue from the existing brand reputation that exists within Virgin, which, as you're aware, is very, very strong. And essentially, that is really the reason why we're saying do not pursue this option either, because the value in the Virgin brand and the company is really quite strong. It brings us to our fourth option, which is to rebrand Virgin America. So VA no longer exists, however, you basically make it, you keep the cultural value within the company, but you rebrand it. And as we've presented, this would be Alaskan Advantage Airlines, AVA. In terms of all the options, this is actually our preferred and our recommended approach because we do believe it will increase company value. It has the potential to increase your brand reputation and you gain the operational efficiencies. I'm going to step you through our strategy for this. So the pillars and benefits of this strategy are firstly that we create the new AVA brand. We implement a cultural enhancement program which facilitates the cultural change required. And we integrate business operations, in particular information technology and over time fleet. And fourth, we will achieve an enhanced customer experience. That's resulting from the synergies created in those internal capabilities, as I mentioned before. What does this mean to the customer, though? So I'm going to present two customers. Now, the first is Teresa. She's a Virgin America customer at the moment, 27, missing some legs, an IT consultant. Now, her travel pattern is that she actually travels from LA to New York City twice a month to do business. But you know what? She's getting a little annoyed because her flights are always delayed. Anywhere between 45 and 2 hours, actually. Let's meet Richard. He's actually an Alaskan airline member and traveller, 53. Now, he travels monthly to Portland and yearly to his vacation home in Honolulu. But the last in the last 3 months, he's lost his baggage every single time. So what we wanted to ask ourselves, well, what does value mean to both of these customers and how can we actually influence this through our strategy? We've identified these characteristics in terms of customer service, flight reliability, in-flight options, cost value, and access to destinations as the critical things that customers are after. And we truly do believe that through our strategy, the synergies are created and all of these elements of customer value are actually enhanced. So let's bring this down on a real level. Here we've got Teresa again. Now she's on time, she's professional and she's relaxed as a result of actually adopting some of the Alaskan Airlines practices in this space. Now Richard, similarly, he actually is confident now that he'll get his bag and air travel suddenly becomes more fun because Alaskan Airlines has adopted some of the Virgin. Now that we've covered off on some of the high levels of our strategy, what I'd like to do is hand you over to my colleague Cameron, who will take you through the risks and the implementation plan.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So as much as we believe in this strategy and that it will deliver you value, there's always going to be some risk associated with any plan. So essentially what we've done is looked at a risk matrix and assessed and quantified your 4 big 4 risks in terms of this strategy. So you can see here on the x-axis you have the likelihood of this risk occurring, and on the y you have the consequence of that. And that y-axis is really tailored to your tolerance for risk. You can see the first big risk here is that you're potentially going to alienate your loyal customer base by doing this. What we recommend you do to mitigate that risk is actually to maintain your existing product suite, recruit a cultural integration team through your human resources management, and really focus on heavy marketing to make sure that that brand equity is maintained throughout this process. The second big risk is that multiple aircraft fleets will increase maintenance costs dramatically. This is through holding costs of inventory, having specialised trained technicians across different aircrafts, and I guess those holding costs in general. So what we recommend you do to mitigate that risk is actually to, when the lease ends in 2020 for your Airbus fleet, we actually recommend that you move to a consolidated Boeing fleet. As well as that, we actually recommend that in the meantime, you actually rebrand the Airbus fleet to match the new brand. The third big risk here is also that your staff retention issues could arise from this merger, which, as we all know, there is these issues when these things happen. What we recommend you do to mitigate that risk is actually look at recruiting an integration and cultural team to maintain that. The fourth big risk here that we want to look at is that the different IT platforms really lead to inefficiencies, both for the company and for the customer. This is differences in booking systems, differences in air schedules as well. What we recommend you do here to mitigate that risk is actually to merge the two IT platforms, essentially. You're not necessarily going to be creating a brand new IT platform, but you're looking at a new overlay of topography that will have a general graphical user interface that actually lets the two existing platforms talk to each other. So you can see here on the risk matrix, your initial 4 risks are actually in a quite high intolerable level. If you take on these risk mitigation tactics that we're recommending, we feel that you'll actually be in a tolerable, safe environment in terms of risks. To look at this at a more granular level, in terms of implementation strategy, there's really 3 keys to success here. This is people and culture, asset integration, and marketing. So for the people and culture, just to reiterate, we're looking at really recruiting a strong integration team and making sure that cultural divide is bridged. For asset integration, it's rebranding and consolidating your fleets. And for marketing, it's different launch events, ambassadors, and heavy marketing. At a more granular level, for the people and culture, you can see that over the 3 years that this acquisition and merger will take place, your recruiting for the cultural enhancement, your integration task force, and your learning and development training for the integration will take place over the 3 years. In terms of asset integration, you can see that the middleware platform is a key aspect of this, as well as rebranding and consolidating your fleet. And you have the marketing as well, which is your product launch events, your product ambassadors, and your marketing campaigns. And really that marketing will increase rapidly throughout the process once you've rebranded most of your fleet. So in terms of what that actually does to your financials, well, the key assumptions I really want to draw your attention to is that your expenses will really be lowered by combining your fleets. The expected integration cost here, I feel that you guys, as you've told us, we're expecting that the outlay would be around about 300 million. This is really meant to be a capital light venture for you guys, considering you've just outlaid 1.6 billion for the acquisition. And 90% of the synergies of the acquisition will be gained from this. What we're actually proposing is that we actually, in doing these tactics, will actually increase that 90% to approximately 96%. And in the bottom right corner, what I want to draw your attention to is how those gained synergies impact your bottom line. Now, as much as being an engineer, I love to look at spreadsheets all day. I'll actually just show you in a more graphical representation that's a bit more user-friendly. So you can see here from the initial merger, you've got VA and AA on the left. So the trends to the right in terms of revenue and expenses would be what would happen if you were to achieve 100% synergy between the two companies. The difference here in your revenue and expenses on the dashed lines is the difference between if you don't take our strategies into account and if you do. So the solid line here, you can see that your revenues will greatly increase from doing this and your expenses will decrease. And that's really through the mitigation of your fleet and your consolidation. What this actually does in terms of increasing the gap between your revenue and expenses to your profit is that you can see that by the end of 2016, around about October or mid-October, you'll actually have a payback on that 300 million initial outlay of capital expenditure. Additionally, this will represent 188% growth over the 3-year period for your company. So I'd just like to pass you back to Justin, my colleague, who can summarize some of our key points, and thank you for your time.
So hopefully what we've been able to do for you this afternoon is to paint a relatively clear picture regarding how we propose moving forward to really get the most out of the leverage between these two very valuable brands and companies. Now, we understand that there's a number of risks involved in any of the options that we've presented, or potentially any of the options that you've considered yourselves. But we feel as if this is definitely the best strategy moving forward to really capitalize on those potential synergies and to realize the best return for the shareholder. So the last point we'd like to leave you with is some aspects of the opportunity ahead. We know that there are very differing demands from the different market segments, as I hope we've demonstrated with our personas, with the two potential customers, with the two existing customers of the brands. We know that the two airlines are very strong, with very strong complementary internal capabilities, and that's as and where we can achieve those synergies, as I believe Sarah has outlined for you. We know that both airlines are profitable, which is fantastic. However, there is a risk of alienating some customers if we don't handle this merger well, and we strongly believe that this is the most appropriate strategy to mitigate the risk of alienation. And through that robust and thorough mitigation strategy, we can shield you from that risk. So, the pillars of that strategy again, just for a final reiteration: maintain Alaskan Airlines and that brand power. Launch the AVA brand, which is a rebrand of Virgin America. And introduce the Alaskan Advantage Airlines. At this stage, I'd like to bring our presentation to a close, and thank you very much for your time and attention, and open the floor to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. As I understand, you're rebranding a new airline, AVA. Can you tell me how it will be similar enough to the current Virgin America to keep the same client base? I think that's the purpose of rebranding, but different enough to get away from the licensing fee that you're paying to Virgin Airlines.
Absolutely. So what we've really done in terms of our strategy is we want to keep those key internal capabilities that Virgin possesses, and that's really around being a real innovator in the market and keeping a fresh look. The way we see it changing is through the adoption of actually some of the Alaskan airline capabilities, and that's particularly around perhaps being a little more sophisticated, a little more without using the word older, I'll use that one. So to have reliability up there as its number one, to make sure that people are not losing their bags. This is the kind of stuff that we want to implement and make sure that we keep within this new brand, which we believe will be enough of a differentiator so it actually could get away from the current Virgin Group fee.
In your proposal, you have the marketing dollars being ramped up, and it would seem to me that the blitz has to come at the beginning and then, lessen over time. So maybe you can help me understand why we go in that direction.
Yeah, excellent question. So initially, in terms of marketing, so the product launch and the brand ambassadors, they're in the front end. Really, we wanted to, tailor the marketing to be once the actual brand consolidation of the fleet had been done. So really, that was the first step in doing that. So once those first initial steps were done, then we were going to ramp up the marketing. Otherwise, it would be sort of like you've still got all these logos of your previous brand here and you're trying to market a new brand. So it was really about doing that upfront work and then tailor the marketing to that after.
Can you just give me a little more information on where you plan on positioning yourself with respect to fares going forward, airfares?
We actually didn't see much of a change in the airfare structure. So the way that Virgin currently operates now with, let's say slightly higher prices, we see that we'll still be adding a significant amount of value to customers, and that's through the in-flight services and some of those, sort of more quirky aspects of the Virgin brand. So we really wanted to maintain the fare structure as it exists.
So are you saying that you're maintaining the fare structure of Alaska or of Virgin?
Of Virgin under the AVA brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would the AVA brand be flying across all the Alaska routes? So would it be an option? Is that the idea, an Alaska or an AVA?
So the initial concept was to maintain the existing routes because that obviously caters to the customers that are using them the most. And moving forward, once we introduce a more integrated IT system with a bit of middleware, we should hopefully be able to perform some analytics that allow us to pick up any trends and identify any new routes or new areas where we should be deploying planes. So initially, status quo, things are working well, we're making money on those routes, and we'll look to capitalize that on the future by identifying future trends.
Could you explain in more detail the rebrand and consolidation of existing fleet and assets? What will that entail for the first 2 years?
Yeah, great question. So for the initial fleet, for VA, the brand that you have now for Airbus, that lease doesn't actually end till 2020. We don't recommend you break that lease early and actually roll out Boeing further down the line once that happens. But in the meantime, we actually recommend that you actually rebrand that fleet. So that's really just the graphical sort of thing, potentially some of the interior as well. So that's really what those costs there are looking at. In terms of consolidation further down the track, once those leases are broken and you move to Boeing, it'll have a consistent brand image throughout the entire fleet.
What should we do with our crew of pilots right now who are flying the 63 Airbus and who will be reading tomorrow in the press release that we're slowly but surely converting to Boeing?
That is an excellent question. So if you can see in our people and culture being one of our key 3 tiers to this successful venture, you can see that learning and development in terms of training, that's actually been allocated costs throughout. And so that's mostly for the pilots, that's partially for the technicians that we have on board for the reactive maintenance as well, and some of the staff in terms of proximity and locations of those planes.
I'm struck by let's say, it seems to me that the royalty tail is wagging the dog here. And just to avoid paying royalties, we're going to this whole rebranding that may cost more, even over a longer period of time, to avoid paying Branson and.
Excellent observation, but I will challenge you on that one because really we saw 2 aspects and that factor came in very much secondary. The main driver behind rebranding is to actually get greater consolidation under Alaskan Airlines. So rather than having Virgin in its current form as a completely distinct brand, and as you've articulated to us, very, very different brand, the only way we saw that you can get those synergies and that you can actually bring Virgin into your fold, both internally in terms of the capabilities and the consolidation of, for example, IT, but for the customer, was to do a rebrand. So that was actually the driver there.
Just for clarification, are we talking about having Alaska and Alaska Advantage working at the same time, or is it just Alaska Advantage that is taking on the two airlines?
No, they would be working at the same time.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so AVA becomes within the fold of AA, but they are two separate brands.
Okay, so I want to also go back a little bit to the marketing issue. So you have tens of millions of dollars that you're suggesting we spend on marketing. Can you give me just a bit of an idea of what that looks like? What's the marketing plan going to look like?
Got the mic, I might take this one again. So essentially our marketing campaign, we saw that it has to be staged and layered. So we can't just, for example, to our customers, change overnight, obviously. We've got loyalty programs, we've got established customers. So what we saw is that we would start with some online sort of hinters, really, and start to build into advertising some exciting features of the AVA brand and look and feel. And then over time, we would actually release that. And potentially what we spoke about is actually giving customers, gifts or incentives, discounts that would actually be launched with the brand so that they're quite excited about it. And other factors in terms of our ambassadors and things like that would probably eat into some of that money, but really a staged approach.
And do you have any concerns at all about keeping the Virgin customer under the new airline and new airline name?
So we spoke at length about that. Virgin is obviously, it's not just an airline, and it's not just in the States, so it's internationally renowned. What we felt was that if we can stage the campaign right, and if they feel like they're getting more value than what they're currently getting, that we can really mitigate that risk.
Can you talk to me about the loyalty plans? The two have very different loyalty plans. What do you plan to do with them?
That's a very excellent question, and that's something we did deliberate at length. Ultimately, because of the different dynamics and the way points accrue, it would be quite, well, I suppose, impossible to merge the two without a bit of pain and a lot of cost and probably alienation of customers. So the idea moving forward is to maintain both of the loyalty programs as is, because the brands, if you will, they cater to different segments. So Alaskan Airlines customers still maintain their loyalty program, and the Virgin American loyalty customers will be able to convert over to an AVA program. So the two will run concurrently in separate streams and accrue as before.
Part of the merger, we had a $350 million cost attached to doing this activity. I'm looking at your numbers here. The numbers seem to be lower from an integration cost perspective.
Yeah, from the integration cost perspective, you looked at it initially 300 to 350.
Yep.
Given your recent outlay of 1.6 billion last year, we thought let's go for the capital light option. Let's do this in the most moderate means possible, and that was the $300 mark. And that actually allowed us to do everything that we needed to do to the nth degree, and that was fine. So we didn't actually need that extra $50 million.
With regards to again the fleet of the new Boeings for the new airline, the reason for that is cost efficiency, I think, of running the Boeing. But with a new look and feel of a new airline, you won't be able to use one aircraft for the other airline. So there's limited value, I think, in having those same aircraft, but for different airlines. I just would like your thoughts on the whole purpose of getting new aircrafts.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So really, it wasn't so much about being able to cross-pollinate and choose the aircraft depending on where it was. Really, it was about that cost efficiency. So when I worked for Snowy Hydro, we used a lot of aeroderivative engines. We moved from having two different banks. We had Pratt & Whitney GG4 engines, just in case you were wondering. And we also had an old Rolls-Royce version, and they were in separate banks. Once we actually switched them all over to Pratt & Whitney, we found that we reduced our holding costs by about 50%. We didn't have the spare inventory. We could get rid of a lot of the excess technicians because there was less training, and the maintenance actually cost less on an ongoing basis. So really, it wasn't so much, as you said, about the brand image of having that on the plane. It was really the cost reduction.
I appreciate that you are boldly doing a rebranding project, but once we're doing that, why don't we drop the name Alaska and get rid of that regional feel that it has, and certainly outside the West Coast, it means very little.
So one of our options was to create a mothership brand, really, and essentially rebrand the whole lot. What we felt is that both airlines have great brand reputation and credibility, and Alaskan in particular. It's actually, in terms of the information provided, it's actually ranking among the highest airline across a number of customer value categories. We felt that initially the change of Virgin would be probably enough in terms of what we could sort of give to customers and still retain them. In the future, perhaps you should look at a complete rebranding of both, but for the moment, we felt that with the brand equity that you have, you'd be better off keeping the AA brand.
We went from a situation at Alaska prior to the purchase of having about $500 million of cash at our disposal. After the purchase, we probably now have about $2.5 to $3 billion of debt. Are you comfortable with that? Do you think it's viable to continue on that basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. That actually really informed our strategy. So we looked at what your current debt levels were versus what they were in the previous years. And that is really why we went with that capital light model. We didn't rebrand the entire fleet. We just went with the minimal $300 million. The payback period for this is actually within about 6 months. And we feel that the added revenue that you're going to get from this will actually put you back into a much more comfortable debt to equity ratio.
Thank you.
Would there not be some savings with the two brands that have actually routes that overlap? Have you addressed that in any way?
We didn't actually look at that in terms of actually being on our strategy platform, and we didn't look at that because we felt that while there may be overlapping routes, they're actually servicing, as mentioned before, slightly different groups of people, and we have quite a solid customer base for them at the moment. Down the track, absolutely, as we mentioned before, right now it's to really maintain the status quo. As we were to grow, particularly the AVA, we would definitely look at how is that duplication of routes occurring, and there would, of course, be cost savings there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it a brown envelope?
You didn't want to leave the stage, did you? You're having fun up there. Well done.
I'm going to unplug because the judges have to deliberate now, right? So just quickly unplug this.